First of all, I'm really happy to see so many people. I just realized, that there is a competition between the different halls, and I'm happy to see that we're having people coming, not leaving. And by the way, this is the session about banking and finance. So if by chance you found yourself in the wrong room, you're free to go. No one will blame you. You're not the only one hating the bankers. But generally, before you do that, let me explain what we are going to talk about. I'm pretty sure it will be quite entertaining and interesting, especially in the context of the fact that everyone is quite tired, and banking might not seem the most entertaining topic, but still. In order to make it as efficient as possible, we're here not to talk, but to answer your questions. I think you are free to interrupt us after each speaker finishes his or her speech, and we'll be, just before you forget your questions, we'll be happy to discuss and negotiate. And then we'll start probably with my super brief introduction. Then we continue with separate speeches by each speaker, followed by your questions. And then we really can discuss basically any topics you desire, because we have plenty of time. I'll start probably from the good news, because the public financing of the public sector in Ukraine has been never so solid and strong as today. I have heard that from a number of bankers saying that we have direct access to international finances, which basically cover the basic needs of the Ukrainian public sector so that people survive. That is enough for survival, but that is definitely not enough for developing the countries and moving towards prosperity. And this is something which is a role of a market, of a free part of the private block of the economy. And because any private economy in the market is working based on money, right? Money is basically a blood of any economy. We need them regardless of which sources we're talking about. And we're basically talking about this sector of economy, which is playing an extremely important role right now and will be playing even a more important role after the war is over. So what basically we're going to discuss? First of all, we are going to understand whether the current financial system in Ukraine can cope with the challenges created by war. We will hear from our honorable speakers on maybe some insights or interesting information how Ukrainian financial system is developing, even sometimes better than the Western ones, because Western systems are more or less, conservative and slow-going. We will understand whether the financial system is ready for the post-war recovery, because that's going to be time when the real job will be started in terms of really scaling what is going on right now. And basically, we will touch some related topics, which we cannot omit simply because some small evils in this area are something we need to remember about as red flags. I mean, the currency control, some compliance issues, some disclosure and exchange of information, and so on. So this is something, unfortunately, we need to remember about. So I want to start with Alyana Gordienko, our first speaker, who is a very good and old friend of mine. She is a person who came from the consulting world like myself, and then became a part of the banking system, and I really believe brought some interesting and useful things for this area of economy as well. So, Alyana, the floor is yours.
Thank you. One disclaimer, I'm not old, I'm just a friend. Good afternoon, and thank you that you joined the panel, and I do think that banking can be fun as well. At least it was fun for me for last 4 years. Let me start by saying that I totally agree with what Mr. Alfred Prauss said yesterday about starting now. And the reasons I think so are a bit different than what Mr. Prauss said, but I'll mention them later in my presentation. So as he mentioned, Ukraine recovery financial needs estimates are very different. The World Bank estimates, as he mentioned, 411 billion of dollars, which is mostly similar to euros now, so almost euros. Ukrainian government, as you probably know, last time they were here in Lugano, they are more conservative, and they said that the estimate is almost double, 750 billion. And whatever are the estimates, more conservative or more liberal, this is unprecedented for the world because, for the reference, for example, the Greece recovery needs in 2010-2012 were 110 billion. So that's quite a difference. And of course, the question comes, which the bankers are supposed to answer, where the money will come from. And the whole concept of the funding source being the seized assets of Russia and people close to the regime, it's a good and fair and equitable concept. As lawyers, we all understand that, but we also understand that that will take time for legal, diplomatic, geopolitical considerations. This is something which will probably not be tomorrow, let's put it this way. So in the meantime, the funds are still necessary, and as I mentioned, if we all, investors, banks, and Ukrainian business wait until either the fire ceases, or the victory comes, or the war ends, whatever you think will happen, that will be too late. So the money should start coming now, and where I disagree with almost all people I talk to is that there are no mechanisms to start doing it now, even with consideration of war, political and other risks. Ukraine has one more asset which has not been discussed yet in these rooms, and this is very creative and qualified lawyers, right, Sergey? So, if you talk to Ukrainian lawyers, they will tell you that there is nothing impossible of a foreign investor with the support of his government, which, as Germany did already, sort of covers certain parts of risks, to invest in Ukraine even now. But of course, there are certain conditions which Mr. Praus mentioned yesterday as well. You need, obviously, support from Ukrainian government, and what you also need are Ukrainian state-owned banks. And now I will start explaining, and I'm sure Sergey will add later on. So why Ukrainian state-owned banks are necessary for the investments during the wartime, not waiting until the victory comes? Because Ukrainian state-owned banks have already the exposure to Ukraine. So they don't need to persuade their headquarters or, increase their risk appetite to invest in Ukraine. That's first. Second, they have expertise on how to administer the funds of IFIs, EBRD, EIB, and other donors who are, as Mr. Praus mentioned also, are managing the pooling of various countries' money which are ready to go to Ukraine now. What also needs to be done is that specific industry-oriented framework should be elaborated by the government of Ukraine and those who will be giving money. And that's why you can't wait. You need to start now, because you first need to create framework. You need to set priorities, and the priorities obviously will be multi-criterial. Let's put it this way. They need to include definitely new labor places creation. They need to include impact on GDP, taxes to be paid, etc. The typical borrower profile needs to be identified, and that should probably not be oligarchs, which we all know where it will lead us. There should be a mechanism of control, and there should be, again, as people yesterday mentioned on this stage, future-based approach, meaning that it will be wise for Ukrainian government and Ukrainian people to start building new Ukraine rather than restoring, what was destroyed. So, how Ukreximbank can help? First of all, there are a lot of prejudices about Ukreximbank, and I'll try to quickly explain why you may want to use critical mind when you are listening to these stories. Ukreximbank has the biggest, I'm sure Sergey will not argue with me on that, the biggest non-performing loan portfolio, historical one, and also, obviously, the war added to that as well. What banks do when they have non-performing loans portfolio, they do provisioning for these loans in 100% provisioning, obviously. That is why, if you look at the capital needs of Ukreximbank, it looks bad, because capital is needed, obviously. But if you look on the financial results and operating profit, actually, even this year, even in first quarter of this year, Ukreksimbank is profitable. Moreover, the management managed already in the first quarter to get the financial result which the supervisory board targeted for the whole year of 2023. So the management is doing a great job. I mean, the circumstances are not great. There are questions we still don't know the answers to, but the trend is very good. What Exim also has, as I mentioned, the expertise in administering the money of IFIs is very important. So Ukreksimbank administered over half of all IFI funding in Ukraine last year, and Sergei will sort of mention Oshad's role in that as well, and I think you mentioned that already on the first day. But it is very important for IFIs not only to sort of give these limits and give this money to sort of for Ukrainian state-owned banks to administer, but also for Ukrainian state-owned banks to be very efficient in that. Because the problem used to be some time ago in Ukreksimbank that the funds were available. They were just not disbursed. Because the processes were too long, time to yes was very long, because the clients were not qualified and didn't, sort of confirm with the risk profile, etc. But this is changing, and with the help of all the Ukrainian business people and owners in this room and on other conferences, I hope that the disbursement of IFIs available funds through the state-owned banks, and in particular Ukreksimbank, will increase. Exim also has an ambition to deliver the best offering for corporate borrowers during and after the wartime. And, to make it clear, if I may, Sergei, the state-owned banks in Ukraine do not compete with each other. We all have our niche, we all have our strategies, we all have our priorities, and the idea which the government tried to sort of formulate in the strategy for the sector, which was developed together with the IMF some time ago, and is now obviously ceased on pause during the war, but it mentions the role which each of the state-owned bank has to support the economy. Ukrexim most likely will be the last state-owned bank, because for many reasons, including that this is the most involved state-owned bank in the support of the defense sector of Ukraine. Therefore, we have started already with the colleagues in the supervisory board and most importantly with the management of the bank to develop new products and new possibilities which would be available for the business during the war, based on the funding from the IFIs and its more efficient administration, and also after the war. So what is important during the war is obviously to ensure OPEX financing, which is aimed to ensure food security of the state. I think, Sergei, you also mentioned that. Export and critical import, and obviously economic recovery process, including agricultural industry and food production, fuel, which is very important and was very important last year. The second direction is CAPEX financing aimed at reducing the cost of final products, creating factories with high added value, and increasing export. And the subcomponents, or there was a question yesterday on the panel where my colleague from the supervisory board was speaking, what are the key sort of industries in Ukraine? In the opinion of Ukreksimbank, those are obviously infrastructure, warehouse logistics, transport logistics, industry, and it's all about modernization of production equipment, production of construction materials and glass, metal, alternative energy and energy equipment. It's food processing. From me personally, I think that it's healthcare, military and education, and all of that on a sort of a high technological level. And obviously, Exim has the widest offering for municipalities and has been working with the cities of Ukraine for a long time, including in cooperation with the EBRD and other IFIs. So, how much time do I have?
Enough. 5-7 minutes if you wish.
Thank you. So what Ukrexim is now doing, sort of considering all of the above, and what key steps are necessary to strengthen the area of IFI financing, in particular, during the wartime and after the hostilities cease. Obviously, in terms of improvement of existing banking products, there should be simplification of requirements to collateral for trade financing transactions, and in particular, lending secured by property rights to revenue in goods without registration of additional hard pledge. Second, in terms of resumption of unique pre-war banking products and development of new banking products. There should be a resumption of cooperation with foreign banks within the framework of clean line transactions, expansion of cooperation with the leading IFIs within the framework of receipt of guaranteed coverage of trade financing transactions, involvement of ECA, Export Credit Agency, both on portfolio and individual basis for financing those customers who are engaged in export and pre-export activities. A resumption of cooperation with leading foreign export credit agencies for the long-term financing of investment projects with the purchase of foreign equipment. So those are the plans. What is also important, and I can't not use my last minutes to preach for corporate governance and the importance of the independent, professional supervisory boards for Ukrainian state-owned banks. As you may know, after I worked with Sergei in a private legal practice, I spent some time working on the corporate governance reform of state-owned companies, not the banks, but the principles are similar. The supervisory boards with the independent and professional members are key for two reasons. If we look upwards, they are important to prevent or avoid or protect the bank from undue political interference. And that's important to understand, not from all political sort of involvement, but from undue political interference. These are two different things. Because obviously, regardless of the fact that the bank needs to operate on a commercial basis and be just a normal commercial bank, we all need to understand that Ukraine has a huge state-owned sector, and not all state-owned companies yet are bankable and can attract funding from other banks. And during the wartime, such state-owned companies in energy sector, in defense sector, they still need liquidity. And there's nothing they can do to get it unless they get it from the state-owned bank. Fortunately or unfortunately, as I mentioned, Ukrexim strategy is for big corporates, so that's mostly us who are sort of doing that. Sometimes, obviously, some of these sort of loans and facilities are not on the sort of a super beneficial commercial terms for the bank, but we should do that because we are state-owned bank. As I mentioned, state-owned companies still need time to become more bankable. We do act sometimes as the development bank, meaning that in our agreements, we do include covenants which help clients, borrowers, state-owned companies, to become more bankable. So, we hope that, unfortunately, war is very bad, but there are opportunities which arise, and there are, transformations which happen more quickly, let's put it this way, because of the events ongoing. Therefore, we do obviously protect state interests and government interests, and we cannot decrease the share of state-owned companies in our portfolio at the moment. Hopefully we'll be more effective in that, or Ukrexim will be more effective in that post-war. But what supervisory board is also important for is to make sure that whatever result the management is able to achieve is sustainable. Because obviously, as you, I mean, if you are sort of involved in one way or another with banking, I mean, risk-taking and risk appetite, obviously bankers have it on a high sort of end. So it's good when the supervisory board has some lawyers, because the lawyers have it on a very low end. So this balance of sort of managing and directing the management to not take excessive risks in order to ensure that the result is sustainable, this is what the supervisory boards should sort of continue to do. And I'm sure that, as you know, there have been competitions for the supervisory boards, and I'm sure that the supervisory boards which would come would be even better, even more independent, more professional, and then they will continue the good job which has been started 4 years ago when the whole reform was implemented. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry if I took longer.
It's fine. Thank you, Eliana. I will just add one observation. I'll just add a very short observation. So I have been never into the public sector of banking in Ukraine, but what I see right now is that, first of all, the state banks are quite fundamentally like solid structures who have certain financial background, certain assets, so they're backed by the country basically, and most importantly, they are not fully driven by commercial interest, by profit, right? So they do play certain social role, and that's very important. And during the war times, I mean, you cannot be driven solely by profit because it will collapse, right? The only thing which was for me always missing was the proper and efficient management of the state banks. But now, having seen what you say, what you're doing, I really believe that we have a very huge shift in this area, and it will really improve further on. So in case anyone has questions, I kindly ask you to fix them in your heads or on paper, and we can come back to them. I hope we can save a bit of time at a later stage. But now probably we'll move on to Olivier Müller, our honorable guest from Switzerland. Olivier is a specialist in the area of investments. So basically, personally, I'm expecting to hear some interesting insights in terms of how specifically investments can help Ukraine. So everyone understands that investments is always good. It always speeds up the economy, but maybe there are some interesting hints. And on top of that, how investments can be useful specifically for Ukraine, specifically for those war conditions or after the war is finished.
Thank you very much, Seri, for the nice introduction. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. For me, the starting point is similar than Oliana, right? The recovery will require significant amounts of investments, especially, of course, in the infrastructure. Unfortunately, my estimate, which I took from World Bank, is lower than yours. I read 349 billion, right, which is obviously wrong, unfortunately. And just to compare to basically to the Marshall Plan post-World War II, which was something like $147 billion. I believe there will be some limits for public funds, since governments have a problem with debt, right? Not only in the US, where they have to basically lift the ceiling basically every couple of years. In Europe, you have Maastricht criteria, which basically also limit kind of public debt. And also in Switzerland, I think that is it's gonna be difficult. But the funds, in my view, will come from private sources. And I would like to develop three thesis to kind of put here into the room. The first is financial services can make a difference. The second is a reliable system is paramount. And the third is trust is everything. I'm going to briefly elaborate. Financial services industry is ultimately about intermediation. Not only on the balance sheet, on your side, I think on the balance sheet is difficult because you have capital adequacy rules, at least for European banks. But intermediation is also to basically intermediate between those who want to invest, off balance sheet of course, and those who basically need funds. Intermediation can also be duration, can be on the credit, on the equity side. There are investment needs and opportunities on both sides. The financial services industry doesn't have own funds, right? If you look at the bank, they have a balance sheet, of course, they can give mortgages, large corporate loans, right, etc., but they don't have own funds. So it will be basically about channeling investors' funds into projects, particularly, of course, infrastructure, into Ukraine. There is equity and debt financing, also with off-balance sheet. There is a possibility for private vehicles or public vehicles. I think at the beginning, private equity-type vehicles will be very, very important. If I look at investors' needs here in Europe, in Switzerland, there are investment opportunities which are in need for various investors. You know, here we have we have positive interest rates again since last spring, for the wrong reason, of course, right? But the real rates are still negative, and quite considerably negative. So the thirst for investments remains very much intact. And if I look at large institutional investors, but also ultra high and high net worth individuals, there is really some need for investment. The second thesis I would like to elaborate is the reliable system, which is paramount. Financial services must rely on a reliable system. Reliable system means basically political stability, reliable currencies, having inflation under control, foreseeable conditions, right? Financial market regulation, right? Appropriate legislation, etc. Here in Switzerland, we have a very good financial system, right? But not because we are more intelligent, we are brighter, whatever, just because it's reliable, it's stable. And that has helped us over the last 200 years to prosper. So I think for Ukraine, it's going to be very, very important to working on a reliable system, for Ukraine itself, but for any other private investor for the entire financial service industry, it will be paramount to work on a reliable system in order to attract financial services and also private funds. Why is this important? Because investors, they look at risk compared to return, right? I'm a buy-side person, so I'm investing money on behalf of my clients, right? So I have a fiduciary duty towards my clients to invest their money the best possible. And ultimately, if I simplify a little bit, fiduciary duty means act in their best interest and also have the best relationship between risk and return. And I think risk does not only include kind of the traditional investment risks, such as interest rate risk, for instance, earnings risk if we are on the equity side, but also operational risk. And that is where I think Ukraine could basically make a difference in order to make sure it's a reliable system, that the operational risk is kept to a minimum, so that investors only need to carry the traditional investment risk. Example, interest rate risk, or also the earnings risk on the equity side. The third is trust. Trust is everything. In financial services, especially in wealth management and asset management, both for private investors and institutional investors, trust is the starting point to start interacting with. So I think that the best financial centers in the world are those which basically have the highest amount of trust. And I think that is probably also kind of something to work on for Ukraine, right? If Ukraine manages to establish, manage, and uphold trust in their financial system, that would tremendously attract investors seeking for investment opportunities. At the moment, particularly, there is a thirst for investment opportunities in infrastructure investing, both on the equity and on the debt side. So trust is very important. What can drive trust quite generally in the financial services industry? I think there are three elements of it, right? There is ethical behavior of all market participants. There is professionalism, which drives credibility. That is very important too, and I stole those two elements from CFA Institute, which is the world's biggest association of investment professionals sitting in Charlottesville, United States. And I'm adding a third one, which basically reliability of the entire system. So I think it will be very worth working on those three kind of dimensions of trust over the next couple of years, being ethical behavior, fostering ethical behavior, then professionalism, which drives credibility, and third, a reliable financial system. I hope in the next couple of years I will be proven right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olivier. It was very interesting. I will just maybe add one more comment. I really believe in trust, so that's something my personal business is based on. And I would just add to that that because we're talking now about the private investments, there's extremely important, even historically in Ukraine, that there is a certain trusted element which connects basically the Western money, the Western investments, and Ukraine. And it should not be only the trust to the country, trust to the economy. There should be a trust in how you invest. Because if you don't come to the Ukrainian airport with a case of cash, right? You need someone which really will guide you through this process, and it's something which has been never working really properly. So, I mean, that's something I'm involved in professionally, and I really believe that this element of these bridges between the Western world, which is definitely flooded with money at the moment, everyone understands that, and Ukraine would be really organized professionally and in a trusted way. We move on. I now pass the floor to Serhiy Naumov, who is basically a head of another state bank represented here. And I just wanted to underline that 1/3 of this panel is Ukrainian state banks, which is an indirect indication that Ukrainian state banking system is currently playing a very important role. So basically, we would like to hear from you, Serhiy, some insights and interesting notes on how basically your bank is coping with this war at the financial front, and maybe you would really share some interesting information which is not available publicly.
Thank you very much. I will share very interesting history, some of the stories. But I would start with the strategy. Like Oliana mentioned about the strategy of state banks, and she said that, no, not she said. I would start with the strategy that was before for state banks. We were, as a Ukraine, as banking sector, we were criticized that we have big share of state banks in banking sectors. That's why the new strategy was, okay, let's sell as much as possible, as many as possible banks. And we had this strategy for privatization. Now, I would like to say maybe something provocative. We are lucky that we had such share of state banks at the beginning of war. You know that in France, after Second World War, sorry for my English, almost the biggest deposit banks were nationalized. And you know when the last one was sold? In 19th. Why they did so? They did that, they believed that state banks in place should play, banks as a whole, should play the really significant role in the recovery of the country. That's why they nationalized the bank, and the bank, state banks, recover the economy. I'm not the advocate that state banks we should have forever state banks. No, but it is example from the history. And it was confirmed during the war. Because you know, private banks, they have the owners. How behave private banks during the crisis. We all know stop financing, ostrich strategy, or camel bird strategy, to put the hand in the sand and wait. And it was, really. In state banks, it was different. And everyone had to understand that country in the war and should do something during this. I will tell you what the Ashat Bank did in the first months. In first months, for us, stability was the major aim. Cash collection, cash delivery, cash in transit. And you know, we had really interesting stories. When we had the occupation on territories, we were the last, I mean the state banks and Ashat, because we had and now have the wide network. We were the last who left the occupation. We took our people and moved them, I don't know, through the many other territories, even occupied, in order to bring back in Ukraine. We used the different channels in order to provide cash. For example, river, all the bridges were destroyed. Our people took money, and on the boat they crossed the river in order to deliver money in some of the villages. There was another stories when they agreed with the gasoline station to collect money in the night. They, by GPS, send the coordination where the money is, and our people in the night went there, collect money and bring to the outlets in order to give pensioners and to make the social payments. So first month, it was the months of, we had to provide stability, we had to provide working system, we had to provide all our software working without any interruption, and it worked. But after that, we understood that who else, not we, not the state banks, and we started financing. We didn't stop financing. And it was also a request from the Cabinet of Ministers. It was a request for the government. Guys, now forget about strategy, for the strategy that was in peaceful time. Now we have the new directions, and Oliana already said, and this is the, let's say, the for whole banks. All banks should do what they are competent to do, and to do more. We, like a management, we decided for ourselves that, okay, we understand that this is the war strategy, we have to finance. We have to mainly finance, provide financing, not to stop. But let's think a little bit further. Let's think about a little bit further. Okay, we're stable bank, we have liquidity, we have clients. Why not to try to combine? If we are now the center of financing, if we are now center of cash, why not to combine international support? Why not to combine state programs and to propose to our clients, first of all, small and medium enterprises, all the instrumentarium? Okay, you would like to do this? Yes, risk is high. We have the guarantee programs. You would like to buy equipment? Okay, we have the partnership program. And now, today, we had some meetings to invite also the funds, private funds. And I would like to tell them that, guys, this is the time to invest. You are sitting outside and looking on Ukraine. You know that this is a war. But come to Ukraine and to see that now Russia has no chance to occupy Ukraine. No chance. No chance to occupy Kiev. We have the western regions, very good developing. You know what is the share of our mortgage loans that we provide, mainly in western part? They have the boom of buildings, housing, and we provide mortgages there. They are developing. And I showed on my presentation the project in Chernivtsi, for example, international airports, a lot of opportunities. Be the first who will come to Ukraine to take the cream of the investments. And we believe that we will win. This is no other chance. Another thing that I would like also to say, maybe first time, could be a good idea. We're thinking about how much we need, 400 billions, but we forget one thing. we have the huge potential if we're talking about our land. Do you remember the dispute in the past when the government, parliament would like to put the law on the land? It was the discussion. Then they found compromise that okay, it will not be in international investors. Maybe after the period of time, voting by people, so we will allow to sell. It was political game, I would say, populistic game. But why not to consider, after of course war will end, to consider this as a possibility for investments? It is huge possibilities. We have the good land.
Just
Nobody is
frozen
going
asset.
to steal from us. Come on, how? It is our land, but we have to allow to put investments there. It is taxation, it is the working places. This is the good basis to start investing in Ukraine, as well as the other laws and anti-corruption and stuff like that. Therefore, I would say that, of course, it is not good when you have in peaceful good times the state-owned banks having the more than 50%. But in crisis, it helped a lot. If no state banks, I don't know how we will do in terms of the financial service. But of course, we have to think a little bit further and think also about the privatization. But after war ended and state banks survived, they will cost much more. They will confirm that they very good performance during even the crisis, because they have the proper governments, they have proper systems, people, products, risk, policy. Maybe that's it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's amazing to hear all those stories. You know how Ukrainians really can survive and be creative. So I mean, we should write a lot of books on that, seriously, because history should not forget that. We move on. The next speaker is Frank Müller, my good friend, whom I know a number of years. Basically, this is the man, an orchestra man, you know. He's doing so many things at the same time. So he's here in a capacity of, in a number of roles. So he's a banker, he's a co-owner of a Swiss bank, but at the same time, he runs a number of other businesses, and as well as the charity organization, which is extremely helpful to Ukraine these challenging times. So I give floor to Frank. Please go ahead. We have roughly 15 minutes for your speech, and I'm giving you the remote control so that you can use your own slides.
First, I want to go a little bit in the discussion which we had before. I have invested around 5 years ago when I sold one of my logistic company. I invested in a small bank opened in Switzerland. The target was to make a merchant bank out of it, and it got the merchant bank, so we are now profitable in the 4th year. And hearing the discussion I have heard now, it's clear in Ukraine right now the state-owned bank will be the distributor of the government money which is coming. The government gets this money from international donors, from international countries. And most of these countries have around 100% of the GDP debts. So I guess the distribution will be much, much less if Ukraine and the Ukrainian government don't make fair investment opportunities. And if it's not possible to bring private investors in the West to invest in Ukraine, this will just be able or be possible when the governments in the West grant for the investments. And so it's coming from the government, the grant to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians get cash to invest over the state-owned banks into private businesses or into private investments. And Here the big question is, the question Oliver was putting, how long does it take to build trust? I'm since 30 years active in Eastern Europe in business. I went there in 1993. To build trust doesn't take 2-3 years. To build trust takes 10, 15 years. And until the most money in the West is privately owned, and most money in the West is owned by pension funds. And how can it be built up that the trust in 2 years is big enough that pension funds are investing into Ukrainian projects? If this won't happen, the numbers we heard, 400 billion or 1 trillion, it will not be realized because the governments won't have enough money to finance this. So only when the private sector is stepping in, these numbers can be reached. That's my personal opinion. And I think here the instruments have to go on, and there has to be a structure where also private investors and pension funds are able to invest in projects in Ukraine. Then it's possible to have in 2-3 years the trust that the international community is bringing the funds which are required. In Switzerland, when you look at the landscape of banks, there are a few state-owned banks, but they don't get, or they do not really get, orders from the government, please finance this sector, please finance this company, please finance this product. I understand in a wartime, it's absolutely necessary to do so. But the big question is, the financing in Ukraine will not end at the state-owned banks. And at the present time, when, I don't know the percentage, but when the percentage goes back from 30% state-owned investment to 60% because of the war, because of the surrounding, we have to be aware that it has to go back. Otherwise, the ambitious goals to rebuild Ukraine will not happen. So, coming shortly to me and my experience, what impact the effect of the war has on different businesses. We have to differ between, on the one hand, I'm coming from the banking system, so on the one side, I was investing 5 years ago in MBER Bank, and there we see the banks, with the war, got the policemen of the governments. So we control all the flows of money, mainly to Eastern Europe. You have to check everything nowadays. And this makes a lot of costs additional. So in the banking sector, all the business got more and more complicated, more and more costly, especially when we speak about war region. The transactions are slower because not only we check, also our correspondence banks checks, and there is a certain lack of trust. Lack of trust is not coming only because of the war, because of the unknown situation. When a bank officer don't know where Zaporozhets is, he simply puts a payment away and says, I don't do this. I don't have the knowledge to do it. And this is the actual surrounding where a lot of banks are, on the one side, the policemen, but they don't have the knowledge to be these policemen. And at the other side, banks are risk-averse, especially in unsecure times. And this risk awareness makes it that a lot of things which might be between banks, for example, state-owned banks in Ukraine and Western banks, the commercial, bigger Western banks don't want because it's too risky in the actual surrounding. And there, I have to say, Ukrainian people are really creative. And this is the real findings out of the last 12 months. So, not for me, because I was busy in Ukraine long before, but a lot of people understood Ukrainians find very quick new solutions. But the amount of solutions we have to find in the next, let's say, 5 to 6, 7 months is tremendous. And not only how to fight against the enemy, but also how to convince trust in the international community. How to bring investors. We saw a Vinica industrial park project. How to bring a Western investor, a Swiss investor, let's take like that, to invest there. Swiss investors are mostly very risk averse. They come a little bit later, pay a little bit more, but they are happy to come a bit later and be on the safe side. So I agree with you. If you want to have the maximum return on investment, you have to go now. But you can lose everything. There's a Vinica investment industrial park, and in wartime it can be destroyed in seconds. That's the reality we are in. So, looking from the bank side, the risk awareness in the banking sector is nowadays very, very big. Then I'm coming originally from logistic business. So I had a logistic company with around 1,000 employees in Ukraine, in Russia, in Belarus, in Kazakhstan, in all these places. And we made around 300 million turnover. Oh, we are making still 300 million turnover. Logistic just profited from the actual international logistic, profited from the surrounding. When people don't know how to act, they ask for consultancy. The consultancy is paid. So the profits of logistic company grew, except when they have assets which they lose in the surrounding. So when a logistic company is very clearly just orientated on Ukraine, there's a big risk they have made much, much less turnover. And what companies are doing, having less turnover, they increase prices. So the prices for transports to Ukraine increased. They went rocket high. They came a little bit back now. But this hurts again export industry in Ukraine. And here we come to another business. I have a furniture business delivering. The first Ukrainian factory was delivering furniture to the Swiss army around 1.5 years ago. We still deliver. And we buy not only in Ukraine, we buy also in Italy, in other countries. And when we have a contract from a state, which is for 5 years, for example, and we don't know how long the Ukrainian producer can produce, it's too risky for us to buy further at this producer. When we have ongoing contracts where we have defined the producer, we will go on. But stability is a key when we promise something to third parties. So in the production or in the international production business, the production facility for the export for, let's say, products which are on a higher level, which are on long-term projects, Ukraine will lose. At the other side, reconstruction might help the furniture industry again. So it's not clear where it's going to, but at least in the international side, it's very, very difficult to be concurrent able right now. And in the banking surrounding, I see a lot of businessmen, also from Ukraine, taking out cash of Ukraine, concentrating, finding possibilities, not only in Ukraine, also abroad. So an outflow of investment. So based on this background, as me as an entrepreneur, not only as banker, I have to say it's not a very simple surrounding to attract investments, to keep investments, to keep orders, international orders to producers in Ukraine. It's a difficult surrounding, and it's only possible when state-owned banks like you provide guarantees based on state guarantees backed, based on international guarantees backed, and the international guarantees, if not having the private sector inside, will not be that big as hoped for the future.
Frank, if I can interrupt you for a second, because of two reasons. First, you should have around 5 minutes to go, and Olana would be soon running for her train. No, yeah. So she still loves everyone, but she will have to run away. Don't be scared. and in order to have everyone to finish their speeches on time, yeah, Frank, let's try to finish that in 5-7 minutes. Okay?
I said what I wanted to say. Last but not least, when the war started, I called up all my colleagues, please send me money. I looked at this money is invested very safely and without problems to the people who need this money or need goods in Ukraine. So I did send beds to refugees camps and so on. And I immediately started. I found on the way other people in Switzerland who did the same. So we made this NGO to support Ukraine. We shipped up to now around 25 to 30 trucks to Ukraine with humanitarian aid. And here are some pictures from this activity. I think the tragedy you see on certain pictures, that goods given just a little bit, helping people, for example here, with chairs, with that they have things to move, with prostheses, with food, with clothes because it's cold, with generators, with hygiene articles, very simple Pampers, with medical equipment. I think it's important to not look what I can do, but it's important that everybody does just a little bit to help. And thank you all who is helping.
If I may, does it work? Yeah, okay. On trust and on now, and actually with the trust, we all, thank you for not being very blunt and not mentioning that Ukraine doesn't not only need to build trust, it actually needs to rebuild trust. Because the trust has been broken many times already. It's fair for us, for Ukrainians, to admit that, and I hope we do learn from mistakes. But on the trust and on going now, can I be a bit pathetic and say that you mentioned that if you go now, it's too risky, and investors are risk averse, and you can risk losing your investment into Ukraine. Well, first, we all know that the war and political insurance mechanisms are being developed, and we just need to make sure that it speeds up. And you also know that it's not only MIGA, it's also certain governments, and I'm sure that Swiss government will sort of follow the steps of the German government and will offer to Swiss investors this mechanism. But also, what is important, if you don't go now, then you will lose not only your business in Ukraine, because if Ukraine does not win, then we all understand that that would have implications on business of all investors around the world. So I'm sorry, I know, Ukraine is not the center of the world, used to be and should not have been, but now it seems like it's sort of playing a big part in the whole sort of system. So, that's ongoing now. Please reconsider. And I'm sure that there are Ukrainian lawyers, and it was mentioned on the panel as well yesterday, I think, that there are many people, foreigners, who know Ukraine very well, have good networking and connections, and can sort of guide you through how to do it in a way which would mitigate and reduce the risks. Also, in terms of predictability and certainty in business planning, that's why I think it's very important, and I think the most viable sort of a mechanism of investment during war would be partnerships between, Ukrainian business, ideally mid-cap business, not oligarchic type of business, and the foreign investors. Why? Because you would be surprised, but Ukrainian businesses are doing miracles, restarting operations, relocating with the help of state-owned banks, their business, scaling up their businesses abroad. So I'm sure Ukrainian partner can be helpful in terms of how to operate business and do successful business and build it from scratch again with all the uncertainties and lack of predictability which you mentioned. And last but not least, I do want to thank the organizers and everyone who participated, because this is where we are building trust. And the more we communicate, the more we sort of pitch Ukraine and explain about Ukraine and talk to investors and connect Ukrainian businesses with the mirroring sort of our interested counterparties abroad, the sooner we will win. Sorry.
Thank you, Alana. I cannot not agree with that. I'll just add thanks a lot. I just wanted to say there are too many Ukrainians not to impact the Swiss, business or government. So, we are the people who want to take care of things. So we are on that, and I can see that. And as just a very small picture on what is happening and how business in Ukraine is behaving, I have a very funny story from a client who ordered something right before the war started, and then 2 days after the war began, basically he got a call from Nova Poshta, that's the post service in Ukraine, and they said, "We're terribly sorry, we're running late, 1 hour." He said, "Are you idiots? Bombs exploding here, don't come here." No, we value our reputation, be there. And when I'm telling this story to Swiss people, they said, "Oh, come on, that's bullshit, right? That doesn't happen." But it's really how it works. And I'm pretty sure that Ukrainians have a lot of things to offer to the world, and that's what's happening already now. Cool. Alana, shall we leave you? Yeah, thank you very much one more time. Have a safe trip. Yeah, if I can ask you please to switch to our main presentation. I'll start in the meantime my short speech. We have enough time yet. So basically, I'm going to slightly spoil the whole party, because my speech is not fully dedicated to finances and banking, but it's something everyone should be aware of, simply because there are some nasty things which are always accompanying the money. This is about transparency, about economic exchange, about taxation, and so on. So I'm just giving you certain small, but I hope very useful insights on what you should expect as private investors, as just normal users of the banking system. First of all, there are two categories of persons who may spoil your life when we talk about your bank accounts. First of all, those are the compliance officers, let's put them that way, which includes banking compliance. And second is the tax authorities, right? Everyone more or less knows how to work with tax authorities, so sometimes it's legal, sometimes not, but it's not the new enemy, let's call it this way. Sorry for this term. And it's a fully internal story in Ukraine, right? At the same time, a couple of years ago, with the new initiatives in the area of anti-money laundering, tax evasion became basically one of the types of money laundering. So if you have money in the banking system and it's not fully taxed, regardless of where it should be taxed, in Ukraine or in Zambia, whatever, then these money are basically equated to dirty money. And this is a much greater risk compared to the risk which comes from the tax authorities. And the reason is very simple. If the tax authorities start to claim something, you give up 1/4 or 1/3 of your money, and that's the end of the story. If money has complaints, you can lose everything because the money are blocked. And if it's a private portfolio, that's not a big deal because you can unfreeze it by payment of the same taxes. But if it's a running business, if it's operational, it can kill your business in a couple of weeks. That's super straightforward. So in this respect, we just strengthen your attention and say that basically, you need to take care of your compliance, of your legality, because otherwise there are new risks which are coming and which are already there. There's the last element of this puzzle, which is the automatic exchange of information, is not yet there. So Ukraine is a bit slow simply because of the war and some bureaucracy procedures. But at the end of the day, the automatic exchange will start, most likely starting the next year. And then there will be full access to this information, and it will be inevitable. So you don't really have a choice. You need to work with that. Now coming to transparency, what I mentioned. Previously, the lack of transparency was your shield, your protection, right? So you thought that, okay, I'm confidential, no one sees my BVI company or accounts, then I'm safe. So no one can understand where am I. Now it's vice versa because of transparency, which is granted by a number of different ways. So it's automatic exchange, spontaneous exchange, exchange upon request, different leaks like Luxembourg leaks or Panama leaks, and a lot of other sources like self-declaration. So everyone already realized that there is no confidentiality anymore, and now it all goes upside down. So now transparency should become your shield. So if previously confidentiality was helping you, now transparency should help you. And how does it work? So if basically you do your homework, you get prepared, you make sure that you are legal, you are fine, you are efficient, then you can take your clothes on and say, okay, here I'm naked, try to catch me. And trust me, if you do so, the first reaction will be like, kind of an idiot, probably will leave him alone, and you will be like the last one in the queue amongst 100, taxpayers. You'll be the last one who would be touched, because the first reaction from the government or from the controlling authorities will be, okay, if he is demonstrating that he has nothing to hide, probably that's true, right? So why do we put so much effort to catch him if we have 99 other guys who are still hiding something, right? So transparency is something we should accept and work with it. There are different measures on how you do that, and basically you should not be afraid of it because there is plenty of instruments in terms of what you can do. Now, a very brief comment on the tax residence. So this is not exactly the topic of this forum, but it's extremely important to understand. The main reason is that fake residence or fictive residence has been always the main instrument on how people avoided taxation. It works both at the personal level, meaning the individuals, and at the company level. So you as the individual could always buy a piece of paper in United Arab Emirates and say, okay, I'm resident there, I don't pay Ukrainian taxes anymore. Done. Doesn't work anymore because tax residence is defined by the physical waste you create. So where you sleep, where your pillow is warm, where your children are going to school. So where you physically spoil this world, where you're creating some traces. In terms of the company, it works exactly in the same way, because companies are not yet at the level where they can earn money themselves. They still need people, right? Because company is a fiction. It's some information on the paper. And so company has certain employees or representatives who are individuals and who do the same thing. They spoil this world by creating some waste and some traces. So that's why, and again, how did it work previously? You create a BVI company, you pretend it's really BVI, and you don't pay any taxes because it's somewhere, no one knows even where this BVI is on the globe, right? Now it doesn't work because everyone says, okay, you are sitting here in this chair, you're running the company from here, then it's not a BVI company, it's a Swiss company, pay taxes here. And it works in the most, in a very huge percent of countries, including Ukraine starting from 2022. And that's fair. And the very simple, let's say, economic reason for that is that if you spoil this territory, I mean, to do the job, to earn the money, pay taxes here. That's very simple. That's very fair. Now, last but not least, some positive news is to finish with. I truly believe, I'm a true believer that currently the legislation of Ukraine creates much more opportunities and flexibility than it was 2-3 years ago. So I used to be a part of the legislation making process in Ukraine. I put a lot of effort to really diversify the set of rules which have been created. And I can honestly say that, for example, the CFC rules, the controlled foreign companies rules, which everyone hates and tells that this is nonsense and so on, they give much more advantages than disadvantages. So if you truly know how to work with them, that will give you more money, you will save on tax. It might sound ridiculous, but it's true. So if you work properly with those rules, if you can combine different situations and different rules, then you can achieve a good result. So that's just a point for every one of you. Don't be scared of what you don't know. Just try to find proper people who would guide you through this process. Yeah, I will probably keep it this way super short. We will leave some time at the end for the questions. Hope you will have them. And with this, I will pass the floor to Halina Helo, who is a person specializing in fintech, and I mean, with a focus on what's happening in Ukraine. Halina will try to share with us some interesting insights as well. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sergey, for introduction. First of all, I would like to say that I am very proud of Ukrainian banks, Ukrainian payment systems, payment services, as well as fintech companies. Despite the war, we have stood strong and collapse has been prevented. We were very creative. The first weeks of the war dealt a real blow to cashless payments and Ukraine's movement towards cashless. Bank cards were not accepted for payments in many regions of our country. However, the problem was solved quite quickly and everything returned to normal life in this sense, thanks to the stable work of banks and payment companies. There was also a problem since many collectors went to the front. There were alarms constantly, so it was quite difficult to collect from terminals, retail, and at the same time ATMs had been replenished. There were keys and in the first days, but a way out of this situation was immediately found, and in agreement with the National Bank, banks collaborated with post offices, with retail, with Ukrposhta operator, and people could withdraw money in the store. Then we had also problem, no light. Accordingly, no internet, and it was impossible to pay by card. But this problem was very quickly solved and through phone number. So Ukrainian banks, Ukrainian payment systems are working, are developing despite of everything. In general, now I live in Europe, and I know Ukrainian banks and fintech company and payment systems are at the forefront of innovation. Ukrainian financial institutions are actively testing innovation and implementing what has found the greatest demand among users. To make a money transfer knowing only number of phone, eventually pay with your face or pay in the messenger. All the services have long excited and are popular in Ukraine. In many European countries, similar services either do not exist at all or they are not widely distributed. Separately, I would like to say about banking, internet banking, Ukrainian. Today in Ukraine, it is difficult to imagine a bank without its own mobile applications. Moreover, almost all the services that you can do in a branch are available in our banking applications. In Europe, not every bank has its own application. And if this service exists, then its functionality will not be as wide as in Ukraine. For example, you cannot make a transfer from card by card to card in online banking, because in Europe they transfer from account to account, and it takes quite a long time. Of course, Europeans are developing their banking application. You can buy tickets on transport or pay for parking there, but most of the usual service of Ukrainians are not available in European banking. But Ukrainian banks and payment systems also has a lot to learn from Europeans. I say about financial monitoring and compliance. Thanks to clearly structured procedures, there are significantly fewer attempts at money laundering and criminal schemes in Europe. Also now we have problems with payments too. All Ukrainian payment systems had to obtain new licenses for their activities until 1st of May. But now only 22 of out 54 payment systems have new licenses. Therefore, since the beginning of May, some payment systems have not worked, which has created serious inconveniences for Ukrainian businesses and volunteers. I would like a few words about funding. My colleagues, bankiers, have already talked about banking funding. There is a rather large topic of grants. Currently, a large number of grants in various fields are issued to Ukraine. You should not be afraid, but fill out applications. In general, about 3,000 grants per day in the world, appear in the world. Projects are also financed through investments. I recently attended an American-Ukrainian partnership forum in Washington. Much of discussions focused on the war in Ukraine and need to reconstruction, reforms, and investments. American colleagues noted that there are many investment opportunities in wide range of sectors may interest American investors, including agricultural resources, high-tech manufacturing, oil and gas extraction, renewable energy, and other. But our potential American investors see a lot of risk in their investments in Ukraine. And it is not only war, it is corruption, unfortunately. And if we want to attract investments, we should make reforms. It will be anti-corruption reforms, institutional reforms, of course, but our colleagues advise to loosen restrictions on currency exchange, for example, because everyone understands why these restrictions were introduced. But there are problems related to withdrawal of dividends and international payments, including interest of foreign currency loans. Also, one of the biggest problems to investing in Ukraine, according to our international partners, is uncertainty in the taxation regime. And also a few words about Sergei's opinion about land. American investors agree with Sergei, and they advise us to accelerate a land reform because 27% of agricultural lands have not clear property now and property rights now. And they advise us to lift a moratorium on foreign ownership of agricultural lands too. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Halina. Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment. I mean, first of all, I'm amazed by fintech, how it improves lives, you know? So previously you had an application, you had to click 5 times, now you have to click 1. Sometimes you have just to bring your face and it works, you know? So this is something which you can feel in a daily life, and it's really amazing. And maybe so he can comment on the land. Actually, I believe this is a crucial and extremely important topic. I've once seen a presentation which should be self-evident to a 5-year person, you know, which says like, first, you have frozen like trillions of money, probably in land. I don't know what's the estimated value of all agricultural land in Ukraine, but it's huge, it's just amazing. Second, I think only 1 or 2 countries in the world have the same, like Venezuela, or maybe 1 more country, if I'm not mistaken. And third, it's a direct limitation of your private ownership. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Like, let's be honest. We're complete idiots that we allowed it to exist. Even in the recent reform which happened, it's a huge compromise, and I believe it's too much in terms of being too conservative. But that's something probably we should focus on because it's a huge reserve. We don't even have to ask for the foreign help. We just make it happen.
it is like one idea we have to consider after the war. Of course, nobody allowed now to allow to sell the land, but it is just the opportunity. We are trying to find investments. Yes, let's look around. Let's look that we are still one of the last countries who are not heavily liberalization for the selling of land. This is just an idea. I'm not just saying that. I don't want someone to say, oh, I'm pushing to sell land to some investors, international investors, that let's sell everything. So no, it is just, we have to look on these areas as well. It is our possibility to attract investments, to let them to buy and to put investment, to put something, to create working places. This is just the small comment.
Absolutely, could not agree more. I would even say that, for example, at the moment, let's say these frozen assets gives a zero effect, right? I mean, apart from some gray schemes. But I'm not saying that it can be pledged for 100% of market value. But even if you pledge it for 10%, this is hundreds of billions, right?
Absolutely. For banks, it is we cannot take in like collateral now.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
if we have opportunity to take like collateral, of course, we will provide more financing.
Absolutely. Okay, we still have 10 minutes to go. If there are any questions from the hall, perfect. Go ahead. You can just shout it and I will, oh, yeah.
Hello, I'm the notorious Alfred Braus who was speaking yesterday. I would like to come to what Olivier was saying, trust. I see trust not only as a question of trust in the system is run by people. So, 2 reflections on that, if I may have. First, the system. The candidate status concerning European Union will certainly be very supportive to build a transparent and more governance-owned system, because there are the 7 deliverables which have to be fulfilled in order to start the negotiations concerning the membership. And one of them is rule of law, the second is, etc., the judicial system, High Court of Justice, etc., etc. So this will certainly help, so I'm optimistic, because Ukraine is working on that. The second thing connected to that is the trust in people running the system. As Uliana has stated, there have been made grave mistakes in the past. Let me be critical. I'm Austrian, but I have been living 17 years in Ukraine, and I was doing quite a few projects, bilateral, multilateral. If you have governors in the regions, they come and go. So if you want to talk about international business, international projects, you stand a good chance that half a year later, there is a different governor. And again, after a half a year later, because they are nominated by the president of Ukraine, and they are taken away by the president of Ukraine. This is happening in rhythms now, even 1 month after another. So this is certainly a disturbing factor. So it's a question of how these things are handled and I would not say by the government, it's the office of the president which decides a lot of things and which tells the government what to do and what not to do. So, build the system, build governance, build transparency, and build stability and predictability also concerning the people who run these systems. Because the trust has a personal aspect. When I'm doing business with Oschat Bank, I have not done it. It is maybe because I trust Sergei or I trust one of his officers, and because the whole system of Oschat Bank is run in a governance-led way. This is it, but it is the people. The same with companies. if you do projects and you are a big entrepreneur, you first gain trust into the people on the other side of the table. And if that's okay, you dig deeper. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Any other questions? Yeah, sure. You can just shout it. Let's.
Thank you so much. So the risk aversion of foreign investors. So I think if we look at macroeconomic situation today, you mentioned that there is a number of countries who are indebted, right? There is German National Bank ended last financial year with a loss. Swiss National Bank also made a loss. Ukraine National Bank made a record profit last year. I wanted to stress that state banks actually made a profit and there is very strong client base, and also maybe it's an idea for Ukraine state banks to stress these fundamentals that we actually make a profit and we actually also have a strong client base. So if we are very conservative and risk averse, so there is no ideal investment. Portugal, Spain, Greece, Italy, they are all non-investment grade, right? So if we look at Europe now, also if we look at history of like latest developments with some Swiss banks, with US banks and so on, there is no ideal opportunity. So I propose to also look at the fundamentals, looks at the financial like balance sheet of the banks and then take a decision. And in this context, I wanted to ask Sergei to actually comment on the dynamics of the business of Oschad Bank, because Juliana mentioned that that her bank is profitable. So did this change? How about like migration of the clients? Do you still make a profit? So that would be interesting to know. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. We're still doing profit, and despite the fact that we have the negative revaluation of our bonds because the bonds were provided in capital, still we have the profit for the first quarter more than for the whole 2021 year. So we are profitable. What is important, we are profitable on operational level. Net interest income increased. Operational profit increased. Provisions, it is interesting, but we have the release of provision for the first quarter. Because in 2022, we were rather conservative. For example, all our loans that on occupied territories, 100% provisioned. We created a huge, big reserves. And because we were rather, how to say, wise and professional during the several years before the war, we were rather conservative from one side. From another side, where we're thinking about the risk policy. Therefore, we entered the war rather strong. In terms of the liquidity, we had tiny refinancing from National Bank of Ukraine. And during the war, we were able to pay our bonds, to pay our coupons, bonds, no restructuring, nothing. It is because also of reforms of National Bank of Ukraine. And now, in the first quarter, we see that we actually reserved everything. And now, because of restructuring of some loans, we have release. We have profit on our balance sheets and P&L. Especially in first months, now because of the strengthening hryvnia, we have the negative influence, but still profitable. And not only me and our bank, but I talked to other banks as well. Ukreexim, I know that other banks, now they can reconsidering the business plans, reconsidering the figures that they put, because our business plan was more conservative that now we have. Of course, we cannot foresee the future for the 2023. It could change significantly. We don't know, but now we see the positive trends. And what is important, we continue financing, we continue attracting clients, and clients are trusting us. And they trust because at the first months of the war, we were really stable. We showed that, guys, don't worry, we continue financing. Don't worry, we are not closing limits. And it paid us, because people see that instead of closing limits, we said that we can provide more loans. And what businesses started doing? Oh, it is not right not to pay Ashat Bank. We will continue paying. Yes, it is difficult, but we will continue paying Ashat Bank, servicing the loan in order to get no new loan for the further development. So strategy, active strategy, proactive strategy during the war, during the crisis, we're absolutely right. Instead of just this decreasing portfolio, you decrease in interest income. But OPEX are the same. In OPEX, it is not like you decrease the portfolio or you decrease the income. To decrease OPEX, and every business knows, it is very difficult. Also, ethical aspect as well. During the war, people decrease the things. That's why this strategy, in my opinion, of course, everything should be balanced. But in my opinion, strategy, proactive strategy to continue doing business is justified.
Thank you, Serhiy, very much. I think we have maybe a few minutes more while our guests are coming to make a final summary. Maybe one more question from the hall. Anyone? Yeah?
Yeah, hello. I'm not from a banking. Question about Raiffeisen Bank. Controversial topic right now at the moment in Ukraine. We have business in Ukraine, production business there. We have accounts in Raiffeisen Bank. So maybe I would like to ask you, Ashat Bank, Serhiy, what do you think? Will they manage?
You will understand that I will never comment on the banks. I mean that my competitor banks. So it is better to ask directly to Raiffeisen Bank, but I cannot, sorry, from ethical aspects, from the business aspect, to comment on what is going on with Raiffeisen Bank. That's why, sorry.
Very nice answer.
So
actually, those are the most difficult
really
types
sorry,
of answer.
But you understand me, I cannot comment on that.
Yeah. The most difficult types of answers when you want to answer, but you cannot, right?
Yeah, I cannot.
Because for sure, we don't want to help the bank to fail, right? So we are also thinking what to do if to stay there. So this is just a comment like for all, because I believe I'm from Czech, yes, so we have Raiffeisen Bank in Czech. It's a normal, very good, stable institution like in other countries. So if we go away, we will help them maybe to fall, yes? Because of this controversial topic with Russia, right?
What I can say that Raiffeisen Bank is still working, financing business in Ukraine, and considered by National Bank of Ukraine as a very important bank for financing economy. They participate in the programs, state programs. Now, therefore, they are working. For the rest, I cannot tell you anything more. What I know, and you know, that Raiffeisen International were included in the sanction, but it is international.
Thank you, Serhiy. Yeah, we had quite an interesting discussion, to my opinion. Thank you everyone very much. Let's give a small applause. Yeah, I'll just make a super brief note before we switch to the summary of the event. Our honorable guests are here, and you'll be surprised probably to see some of them. I just wanted to say that I truly believe that a banking system will play a great role in the future development and recovery of Ukraine, and that's something we should focus on both on the European or Western side as well as on the Ukrainian side, as has been many times mentioned in terms of trust in particular. I just wanted to make a very brief note that, I mean, we are here because someone is fighting in Ukraine, right? So I'm not trying to say that we have to give big applauses or give a silent minute or whatever. Let's just remember about what's happening there. Those guys are really true heroes, not us here. And I really believe that, I mean, these are challenging, but truly, the times which really inspire, and that's why let's really believe and keep those guys in our heads. And I truly believe that we'll have a bright future. And honestly, I'm proud of being Ukrainian, and I really hope that my home country and Europe and the rest of the world become really united and will have a very nice and bright future together. Thank you very much. Героям слава!